Willkommen in einem anderen Aufregungsvideo, or welcome to another exciting video. This is the fifth in my DBN series, which will cover combat results, or what happens after combat has been conducted or concluded. Only the original combat system will be covered in this video. The attrition system will be covered in subsequent videos, most likely. The rules references will be visible in each slide. The rules reference uses a version 2019 of the rules. In some cases, I've needed to go back to the original DBA rules to provide references to be placed in this position. This video is based on my examples PDF document, which is a book which provides a large number of examples of play. This file can be found on the IO Group's Glitchspiel site. The link is at the end and in the description of this video. This version of the example files uses the 2019 version of the rules. This video series is not designed for experienced players, thus the primary audience are those not familiar with the rules, particularly DBA. As a result, some of the nomenclature used in this video will not be commonly used in the standard rules, but would be more understandable to someone from outside of the tent. The main changes are that I'll be using centimetres, assuming you're using 15mm figures instead of the word paces. I'll be using the word element instead of the word unit, and I'll be using the word turn instead of the word bound, specifically for player turn, and of course this will also include a game turn. Once we've gone through the process of basically spinning dice, applying factors and modifiers and comparing it and then getting a ratio, the most common result of this is a recoil. There are a couple of other results such as fleeing and being destroyed, and as well as no effect. We'll be investigating these in more detail. When we've calculated all our factors and compared, and we achieve a ratio between the two values, there are generally three categories of results. Draw, which is shown at the top, 12-4-1. Loss up to, but not including a 2-1, which is shown in the second, which is 12-4-2. And finally, the most severe result or category, which is 2-1 or greater losses. So, example, if both players' modified combat values are identical, then obviously it's a draw. If one side result is 6 and the other is 7, then the first score is a loser, or is the loser. And because it's not exceeding 2-1, it fits into the middle group, which is a loss up to, but not including 2-1. And finally, if one result is 3 and the other is 6, then the first result is the loser, and that person is a big loser because it's 2-1 or greater, which means he fits into the 2-1 or greater loss category. As you can see by this chart, the results will vary based on the troop types of the loser, and in some cases the winning troop type as well. Once you've gone through all the possible actual results, there are really 4 possible outcomes to any combat. No effect, quite rare but still possible. Recoil, where the loser recoils. Flee, where the loser flees. And destroyed, which is where the loser is destroyed. No effect is, of course, self-explanatory, so I will not delve in that in any particular additional detail. Recoil is the most common, so let's look at an example. In this case, the French element that recoils as a result of close combat or fire combat moves 1 base depth directly backwards or away from the base edge of a NLF or BUA. Basically non-linear fortification or built-up area. What happens if there are friendly elements to the rear? Any friendly element that is contacted during the movement, that is the recoil movement, also recoils 1 base depth, providing the friendly element is facing in the same direction. The recoiling element is destroyed if the movement results in contact with impassable terrain, with friends not facing in the same direction, or obviously with contact with an enemy element. There is one example where interpenetration is allowed. Foot skirmishers can recoil through any foot, but only if it and the element being recoiled through are facing in the same direction. In this case, the French foot skirmishers are forced to recoil and wish to recoil through the friendly musketeers, rather than forcing the friendly musketeers back. Now you can see why it would want to do this. It was obviously shielding the musketeers. The skirmishers have now been pushed away by the enemy musketeers. It basically wants to expose its musketeers to the enemy musketeers rather than it continuing the fight. This is probably what actually occurred when skirmishers met solid foot enemy. Thus, in this case, the foot skirmishers move back 2 centimetres, which is its base. Now, this happens to be the same space that the friendly musketeers occupy. So, it can either force the musketeers back, or alternatively, which is what it particularly want to, it can move an additional base depth back. So it ends up behind the musketeers. It's basically interpenetrated the friendly musketeers. There are many cases where a recoil will result in the element being destroyed, this being one of them. An element forced to recoil across the face of an enemy element that is in contact with one of its side edges is destroyed. This is the other examples of where recoiling elements are destroyed. The recoiling element is destroyed if the movement results in contact with impassable terrain, with friends not facing in the same direction, as you can see here, or if it contacts an enemy element. The next result is fleeing. It's not very common, but certainly it does occur. An element that is forced to flee as a result of close combat or firing combat recoils normally, as we've discussed. If it has not been eliminated as a result of the recoil, it then moves 15 centimetres away from the enemy in the direction of its own baseline, staying as far away as possible from any other enemy element. It ends its move with its back to the enemy. The final result is destroyed. In this case, the Ulan is being attacked by a French dragoon, which then gets 2 line infantry to come up to support it. Let's go through the combat in more detail. The French dragoons versus the Prussian Ulans. The French dragoons have an FCF of 4, spin of 5, modifiers none, result 9. The French Ulans have a FCF of 3, spin of 3, modifiers close support -2, which means it results a 4. The French win 9-4, or more than 2-1. The Prussian is destroyed. When destroyed, the Prussian element is simply removed. Now, there is no specific reference in the rules to this, and I basically had to go back to DBA version 3, page 12, under destroyed elements to get it, but I really do assume that this is quite self-evident. Destroyed does mean destroyed, and this is why it's not present in the NBN 2.1 or DBN 2.1 set of rules. We have covered what happens to the loser. The victor can also do a few things. These are a list of what the victor can do, either stay put, pursue, or a support follow-on, which is basically supporting elements which are doing something very similar to pursuing. Now, these results are primarily, or actually exclusively, only involve elements which were involved in close combat. If you win a fire combat, you always stay put. So, first example is pursuit. This Ulan loses a close combat with a French dragoon. Ulan on the right, French dragoon in blue on the left. It must retire 1 base depth, facing the French element. In this case, the French dragoon has the option of pursuing or staying put. It decides to pursue, which is a 1 base depth move. The opposing elements remain in close combat for the following player turn. Let's look at an example when the Ulan is destroyed. The Ulan loses a close combat with the French dragoon and is destroyed. It's removed. As far as I can work out, the French dragoon still has the option of pursuit, which means it can move forward 1 base depth. The dragoons in this case has the option. Now, there are some cases where pursuit is compulsory. All attack columns, primarily infantry or exclusively infantry, all heavy cavalry, all British cavalry except KGL, and all irregular cavalry who are victorious in close combat must pursue for 1 base depth. You can see this rule in case 331. There is a player choice option as well. All other mounted who are victorious may pursue. In other cases, they stay put. Let's look at support follow-on. This Ulan loses a close combat with the French dragoon, which is supported by another French dragoon. The Prussian Ulan must retire one base depth facing the French. The French dragoons have the option of pursuing or not pursuing, and they decide to pursue. So the French dragoons pursue, move forward one base, staying in contact. The supporting dragoons have the option of conducting a support follow-on move, which means it continues to move one base forward, remaining in edge contact with the pursuing dragoon. If the Ulan was destroyed, the pursuit and support follow-on could also still occur. This concludes my Part 4 DBN training video, in this case providing an overview of combat results. This video is based on my examples, a book for DBN, which can be found in the Kriegspiel.io group site. Just go to the File option, select Napoleonic Rules, and then select a DBN, and you will find this document. Denken Sie daran, immer für Heimatling zu kämpfen.